Hey, fellow mathers, welcome to the podcast where math is figure-outable.
We're popping in to share that we'll be hosting another free Math is Figure-Outable challenge.
Woohoo!
Registration isn't open quite yet, but we'll let you know when it is. The best way to get all the info is to join our newsletter.
Y'all, you can join our newsletter at mathisfigureoutable.com/get-newsletter. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/get-newsletter.
This challenge will run from September 3rd through 5th. Join our email list at mathisfigureoutable.com/get-newsletter to get all the details.
Hey, fellow mathers! Welcome to the podcast where math is figure-outable. I'm Pam Harris, a former mimicker turned mather.
And I'm Kim Montague, a reasoner who now knows how to share her thinking with others. At Math is Figure-Outable, we are on a mission to improve math teaching.
We know that algorithms are amazing human achievements, but they're not good teaching tools because mimicking step-by-step procedures can actually trap students into using less sophisticated reasoning than the problems are intended to develop.
In this podcast, we help you teach mathing, building relationships with your students, and grappling with mathematical relationships.
We invite you to join us to make math more figure-outable.
Hi there.
Hey, what's up?
Oh, so much. We're busy.
So much.
Busy, good stuff.
Happy almost weekend.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Let's do it.
So today we're going to have an interesting conversation because
Ugh.
not too long ago, you were invited to be on a debate. And I want to give you a chance to kind of unpack that and think about, share maybe with our listeners some important things. One of our leader in our coaching program said ahead of time, I really hope that this isn't like I want to win the debate situation from both sides. And she mentioned that I hope it's not going to be filled with loaded words and that it's not about one side wins. And I shared that with you ahead of time. So why debate at all? What were you hoping to accomplish?
Kim, I got to tell you, I'm actually a little nervous for this podcast episode, which I'm not usually because it's just you and me chatting about all things math. This matters to me. It matters to me. It's been really interesting that not only this particular leader, like you said, who's in our coaching group, but also several people reached out to me on social media or just said on social media, why the debate? We don't need this debate. This is old news.
Yeah.
And then with some things following that, like this debate is long over. Of course, we use both. I even heard someone say both, so maybe I should be a little more clear. The name of the debate was Teaching Procedures versus Developing Reasoning. I think maybe it was Developing Reasoning versus Teaching Procedures. And we worked on those words a little bit because words are so hard. And so you might say, oh yeah, this is the age-old debate between like constructivist inquiry discovery versus explicit or direct or I do, you do, we do. I mean, and all of those words I just said could mean so many different things to so many different people. And so, yeah, maybe a debate where all we do is throw those words around isn't actually very helpful if we don't have some specific examples about what we mean. So it's super interesting to me when I started reading a little bit of that pushback about why the debate at all. And one of the social media persons said something like, of course you do both. Another person said, it depends on the strength of the teacher. If the teacher's a really good teller, then they should just tell. If a teacher's more creative, then they can do more inquiry. And I was like, wait, what? So I'm going to say unequivocally, I actually disagree with that last comment a lot. But I also want to invite our listeners to consider that I'm not actually on either of those maybe traditional sides of the debate. That I'm going to suggest we actually have a different message here. And our message is that mathematics is figure-outable, and that then impacts the way that you teach. And I went into this opportunity to debate. So first of all, I didn't set it up. I was invited to the debate. The gentleman at Mathific that invited me said, I think you could represent this. I could represent your position well, and I would invite you to debate this. I'm not actually sure what he meant as my position when I got invited, but I am very interested to bring into the world, into this sphere of discussion, ideas that I didn't have as a young teacher. As a student of math, in school, and then as a young teacher, I wish I had heard my now message. I wish I had been given an alternative that maybe isn't either one of these sides. Not maybe, it isn't either one of these kind of maybe traditional or what people were expecting when they came or saw that debate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes everything is pitted as a either or. And you and I have talked quite a bit about the idea that there are different kinds of lessons and there are different things that we would be I almost said explicit. I try really hard to avoid the words direct and explicit in inquiry because of exactly what you said. It doesn't what I mean is taken in by the person. The words I use are taken in by the person that's hearing them, and it instantly gets turned into their understanding of that word. And
It can't
so,
not, right? It can't
yeah,
not. That's our experience, sure.
right. So I generally try to avoid those words as well. But we have had some pretty long conversations about how, based on the math that we're doing, based on what we're trying to hoping to accomplish in the classroom, we might approach the way that we teach a little bit differently. Now, I think we're in agreement that we're never going to stand up at the board and do I do, we do, you do,
Well, and so what does that mean?
unless, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
do your unless, and then I'll describe
Well,
it.
unless we're talking about social knowledge, if it's vocabulary that we have to tell kids, but teaching the actual mathematics behind what we're doing is, it's interesting because I think people think it's one or the other. And like you said, we're talking about something a little bit different.
Teaching
That,
styles is one or the other.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about experiencing math in a way that I think people haven't really experienced. Some people have, but not a lot of people have experienced what you're talking about. If they've come to a session or they've come to done a workshop with us,
Well,
they probably have a very clear picture for that portion of mathematics because they've experienced it with you.
yeah, and let me just say, people might have experienced real mathing, like they might be mathing in their mental actions are
Yeah,
actually mathing, but they might not have experienced teaching, mentoring, helping students learn to do those mental
yeah.
actions of
Hmm.
mathing. So that's why we feel so strongly every workshop, presentation, discussion that we have, we begin with a common experience
Hmm.
so that people can go, wait, that's what you mean?
Hmm.
It's not. Do you remember the conversation I told you about where I was just at a conference? Hi, how are you? I didn't know this person; she know me. And in the middle of the sessions, the facilitator said, "Turn and talk to your partner about something." I don't remember what it was. And the very nice teacher turned to me and said, "Yeah, because that discovery stuff doesn't work." And I said, "Oh, tell me more about that." And she said, "Ha! I tried to. Yeah, I thought, oh, I'll give this a go. I'll give it a try." And I walked into her 8th grade classroom and said, "All right, today you guys are going to discover the Pythagorean theorem. Go ahead, go." And then she kind of laughed. Ha! She goes, "Do you think that worked?" "Of course not." So then I said, "Well, that was a failed experiment." And then I told him the Pythagorean theorem, and off we went.
Hmm.
That's one interpretation of
Right.
what could be on that side of discovery learning. That's not what we mean. So y'all, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, we invite you to go listen to any of the mathing episodes, which I think most of them are, to gain a common experience with us, so that when we talk about what we're advocating, when if the debate's title was developing reasoning versus teaching procedures, then you have some idea of what I mean when I say developing reasoning. And so I felt really strongly in the debate that, in fact, I actually asked to tweak the questions. They had told us the questions ahead of time, and I said, "Ooh, could we please have?" Well, one of them was inspired by you, Kim. The very first one was, how do you measure success? Like, what does success
Hmm.
look like? What is your objective? What's your goal? And then I tried to be really specific with examples in that answer. And then also, what would a lesson look like so that we could actually know what each other meant? And so I did a quick problem string. I kind of tried to give an example of high dosing with the major relationships so that kids are using those to reason logically to solve problems. And I think, I don't exactly remember when she said it, but She said, what would a lesson look like? Model, practice, model, practice, model, practice. That's a good lesson. And then of course, this is quoting her. Of course, we would do all the other things, but really, learning is going to happen when you model, practice, model, practice, model, practice. Well, if anybody's taken our mini workshop called Transforming Teaching, you know that we do a bit in there. Well, in fact, I think we do it in all of our workshops. We've done it in the Developing Mathematical Reasoning books, where we talk about what the word model means in mathematics education. And here's a great example of why I do that. Because when she says model, practice, model, practice, model, practice, she's a very specific format in mind. Now, you could be like, Pam, what are you reading her mind? Well, I watched several webinars that she's put out that are you've just widely, what's the word? Widely accessible? Is that the word I want? You can watch it out there.
Easily accessible.
There we go. And so I just, grabbed what I could find when I Googled, and she had, very, it's her in one of the demonstration videos. She's holding a script in her hand, and I don't remember it exactly, but she wrote on the board the subtraction symbol, and she said, okay, class, this is called minus. And then she pointed Kim. And then Kim, the student, said minus. And then she repeated minus. And then she pointed at Steve, said Steve. And Steve said minus. And she said, what is this called, class? Pointed at the class. They all said minus. And then she wrote down 5 minus 3 or something like that equals. And she said, okay, how do we say this, class? Everybody with me? Ready? 5. And then points to the class. 5 minus 3, 3. If you could see me right now, I'm pointing back and forth between the board and the class. And then she said, okay, now everybody, now we're going to draw 5 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this says minus. What does that mean? We're going to get rid of them, whatever her words were. Do it with me. 1. And then she crossed out 3 of them. Let's count what's left over. Ready? 1, 2. And they're all counting with her in this like choral kind of thing. Okay, everybody. So what is 5? 5 minus 3. 3 is 1, 2, 3, 2. And then she writes down 2. And then that was the example of this model. Like, I'm modeling for you. I'm practice where I'm modeling for you, and we're practicing right there. She also mentioned, that's a high response rate. We get students to respond often, and she used some, I don't remember the number, but like we need to have students respond often, so that really gets it into long-term memory, and maybe bores you to tears. I mean, could you imagine? Like, I don't know, Kim, did you ever have a class that was that scripted of repeat after me? Whoa.
I mean, I might have at a very early age. I don't remember that far back. I'm getting older.
You're so old. Don't say that. You're 10 years younger than me.
In this example, though, there were 2 different parts. That it seemed to be there was the part where she was naming minus and having the kids say the word. And we would say that there is some direct teach to
telling kids, yeah.
Yeah, but then the 5 minus 3 part, the tally marks, the here's how you do it, I think is where we would push back that
we don't need to demonstrate that method.
Yeah.
Like, this is how you minus. You draw tally marks. You cross out this other number. You count what's left over. I mean, that now everybody and then the practice for her is going to be, I'm going to give you a bunch of problems, and I expect to see exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in one of the webinars, she said then she would circulate around and catch any misconceptions. And I got to hear that as I'm going to catch kids doing the steps wrong.
Correct. That's how I would hear
and
it.
then I'm going to tell kids what they're doing wrong, and I'm going to do that quickly and often. But the words that they're using is like misconception. I'm like, nah. Hey, Kim, when you just mentioned that we do have to tell kids minus, let me just give kind of the opposite. What we're not saying is that we were going to say, hey, kids, see this symbol? What do you think it's called? That would be the extreme kind of discovery inquiry read wrong,
Yeah,
right? Like understood, like that's not what we mean. We don't, if something is social, then we tell kids, we're like, okay, this symbol right here. Now, we might do it in a kind of intriguing, tag it when kids need it way. We might say, oh, I see what you're doing in that problem. We were just talking about how Kim had 5 oranges and she gave 3 to Pam. How many oranges does Kim have left over? I saw you like thinking about 5, and then you took away 3. We could write that 5 minus 3, and I would write that down. And we say that as 5 minus 3, 5 subtract 3. Like, and in that moment, I'm showing the symbol. I'm giving the kid the symbol. I'm not saying, how do you think you write that? Nope. Try again. Nope. Try again. No. Like, it's not a guess what's in my head, guess what society has deemed to be that way. But only when it's social, I'm going to try to do it when the kid needs it so it can latch on their prior knowledge and it makes sense in that moment. It's based on what they've been doing, but I'm not going to make kids guess that thing. Then we're going to experience what it means to subtract. And we're going to experience what it means to put two groups together. We're going to experience what it means to compare groups. I mean, we're using super young stuff here because I use that example.
Yeah. I think the pushback sometimes from people who don't like the idea of a debate might push back because they hear that there are two camps and it's either or. And what I've heard people
That I'm
say
out to
is,
win and
yeah,
squash you and walk away as champion.
yeah, and what I've heard people push back with is there's more of a continuum. And I heard at some point, I don't know, in the last year or two, Dr. Rachel Lambert talk about a continuum. And I would agree that there are different things that you want to do for different types of lessons. There might be some lessons where I lob this big problem out and I have kids productively struggle and work and I circulate and I'm
Wrestle and
nudging.
grapple.
And then there are some where it's maybe a little bit more structured. It's more, that seems like the thing that I just said was not structured, and it is, but a little bit more like short term, and it's maybe more of a reinforcement type lesson, and it's getting you to
Quicker back and forth.
familiarize with something that you've already grappled with, and it's more about fluency. So there are different types of lessons, but I think we would say there's very few situations where we would be kind of on the, in my mind, right side where it's a little bit more direct. We would err on the side
You
of
don't mean correct side when you said right. You meant on
oh no,
this
on this
side
side,
over here.
this side. I think we would, in general, live a little bit more towards the other side, but not so far to the end where you just put some stuff out there, stand back,
Kids are
watch
on their
kids.
own.
Yeah.
No
So,
help.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think we think it's this or that other. I would say that we do agree that there's a continuum. It's just where do we spend most of our time and in what circumstances with what types of lessons? Because in all situations, the math that kids are doing, we want them mathing. We don't want to tell them the math. We want to raise experiences for kids where they are grappling with mathematics and supporting them in that.
So there's an example of a different meaning, or of the meaning that she meant of model practice, model practice. But we're going to do that by modeling mathing behaviors. We're going to model curiosity. We're going to model stick-to-itness. We're going to model looking for patterns and using those patterns to try on other problems to see if they work, sort of an inductive kind of approach. We're going to model becoming more efficient, sharing our ideas with others so that we can verbalize the relationships that we're creating in our head so that then we gain clarity as we verbalize. We're going to model all of those behaviors, and then we're going to encourage students to practice those behaviors as they dive in and solve problems.
When you say we're modeling those behaviors, what we're not doing is saying, okay, students,
watch me, 1, 2, 3.
We're gonna be curious, and here's how you become curious. They are engaged in the relationships that we have as we are doing mathematics, and we are talking out loud and thinking out loud and involving them in the conversation. It's not that same type of model practice where we state it, we represent it, now you do it.
State it and act it out. We're not acting. We're mathing, and we're inviting them into that world where it's more of a mentorship of what it means to math.
And I would just add on that in order for kids, people, to math, you have to give them an experience where it's welcomed. And in that situation of model practice, they can't math because you've already told them what to do.
Oh, that's nicely said. I mean, they could, but many don't.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could ignore it and just mimic on my paper. I kind of do that a little bit.
Well, or you could ignore it like my personal son did, and not write anything down and get not the best grades because, well, honestly, he got fine grades because he was always right. Yeah, the teachers very rarely knocked him off credit because he had the answers correct because he was reasoning.
Yeah.
He literally, but that is super unusual. And we have kids out there who follow the rules, who do what they're told. I don't know that we want to knock that. I think we want to take advantage of it and say, these are the rules here of mathing. This is what it looks like to actually do the mental actions of a mathematician. One of the things that I wanted to bring up just in this conversation, if you don't mind, is while I was doing my research before the debate, and I was going to grab his name and I forgot, but one of her colleagues had done a debate with on a Canadian podcast and said something like, it doesn't really matter how good the lesson is because the learning is going to happen in the practice. So we need repeated drilling over and over and over again. That's where the learning is going to happen. I find that really enlightening. So first of all, I can just say I disagree with that completely. I disagree with that's not exactly what I mean. What I mean is the basis, what's behind that, what's under that, speaks to this idea that learning is rote memorizing something. And so it doesn't really matter how you were exposed to it the first time, because I'm going to drill you over and over again. And if I just drill you on it, you're going to have it rote memorized. And then that's the definition of learning. I want to push back on that. Sue, who we work with, who we love, I'm not going to quote her right exactly either. She said something like, it's almost like their definition of teaching, of learning is what the teacher's done. And it's a little bit less of the mental actions that a student's doing, like to actually have learned something. So I'm teaching if I drill you on something so that you have enough exposures to it so you can have it rote memorized. But we would say you're teaching if the kid's actually learning, and define learning. Learning is when they actually have mental connections and relationships that they can then logic through to reason for problems.
Yeah, it reminds me of
Why are you laughing?
working with teachers who say, well, I taught them. And in my head, I go, yeah, they haven't learned. So have you taught them?
Like the definition of teach, right? Yeah.
It's tough because, if your definition is you tell them and then they're supposed to get it, then, you might feel like you've done the job. But we have to take ownership of the fact that our job is to make sure that they have learned.
I got to tell you, I'm fussing with this continuum a little bit because I think I know what you mean, but I think I also might know how people might hear it. So
Ooh, yeah.
tell me if I'm hearing you the way I think I'm hearing you. I wonder if people could hear. So it depends on the day or the way you feel, or like sometimes you let kids kind of play around a little bit, but really the end goal on this other, you're going to keep the whole continuum so that you're going to tell them in the end. So sure, we can do some conceptual understanding. We can throw some manipulatives at them so that they kind of get, like a feel for what's happening in the algorithm. But then we're going to tell them the algorithm. Like I feel like that you could hear what you said about the continuum that way.
Yeah.
I'll just say from my perspective, I think of it a little. I think the continuum you meant was more. There are some lessons that I'm going to let that are where the problem, the thing they're messing with, is rich enough that there's less quicker back and forth. That it's a bit more dig-inable. That's more like what we would call a rich task, which I know the terms, but then there are other lessons where in a problem string where I'm given a problem and they're getting instant feedback and I'm representing thinking and it's snappy and we're going. But then there are other tasks we might do, like I have you need, where bam, we're back and forth, or even hint cards where I'm saying, hey, here's from your own personal deck, here's 7 times 8. What do you got? And I'm not sure that hint's working for you. Let's like maybe think of a different hint so it works better. That's super like snappy, and we're actually wanting kids to travel that mental path often and quickly. Is that kind of the continuum you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think so, because when I think about like a really big, rich task, I feel like I'm letting them grapple and I'm observing and I'm nudging, but I'm really just listening to see before maybe I interject too quickly. I'm nudging for sure. And
you are interjecting.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like that's a little bit like bigger, richer, deeper of a situation. And then
not unproductive, not off
never,
without knowing
yeah.
what they're doing, not whoa, really, it's not that they're well, all the knots. Even in that richer, messier, everything you just described, kids are super clear on their task. it's not
And
that
their
they're
role.
confused about their role. It's not that they're
Right.
confused about what they're to be doing, not any of that at all. And that way we're very, may I say the word explicit? Like we explicitly make sure they know their role, their task, what they can use, what their job, when they know they're done. All of that is very explicit. But the mathing itself is not do this, do this, do this. Now mimic me. I did it. Now you do it. Now, wait, I do it. Then we do it. Then you do it. I can't even get the order right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when we talk about explicit, you and I are like, oh, we are very explicit. Like they listen.
About
The
their
structures, the
role and about,
systems, the how do you know you're done type stuff. The actual math that's happening with any of these lessons is much more driven by where students are and where we are nudging them.
and our goals and
Yeah.
the standards that we have. Like we are very explicit in the direction we're heading and the what looks like success, and the
Which is
correct
interesting
answers
because
are important.
I
Okay,
think
keep going.
that's why this debate is important and why I was really happy to hear you include actual math, and not just all
Examples.
these
Yeah.
buzzwords. Yeah, because I think until you get to experience what we're talking about, then you, like you said, you might hear what we're saying and go, "That's what I think," or "That's what so and so thinks." But until you experience what we're talking about, the way that we mean it by doing something with us, I think there's always going to be a little bit of a assumption
Hmm.
or a little bit of
Well, basing what you hear on your past experience.
right,
So
right.
we need to have a common experience so that we actually understand what each other are talking about, not just using words to say all the words,
Hmm.
and then pretend that we're communicating,
Yeah.
with, yeah, yeah. Whew. Well, I'm glad it's over. I took lots of deep breaths. I really, really wanted to come across respectful. Kim, I don't know if you remember, one of the very first things that I said was that I invited everybody to when you say we're all going to agree, stipulate. I'm going to stipulate right now. We all want what's best for kids. We
Right.
just have some differing ideas of how to make that happen, and let's have a debate right now on. Let's get those ideas out. Let's have examples so that we know what we're talking about. And I'll just say that again. I think everybody involved in this conversation wants what's best for kids. We're all on the side of trying to help better kids' lives. I think we could benefit from some examples of things that have helped us make that happen.
Yeah. And I think I'll add that a lot of us have experienced the kind of classroom that was described from Tony. Many of us grew up in those classrooms.
How about most of us?
Yeah, but I don't know that many people have grown up in classrooms like the one that you described, that you
Mm,
want people to experience. And so
that
it
we
can be
advocate.
very, very tricky for others who haven't experienced what we're talking about to be able to really understand. So, I mean, I think it's why we do the work we do. We're constantly putting out stuff and workshops and webinars and challenges and things like that so that people have a vision for what we're doing here.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Hopefully that was crystal clear. Thanks for tuning in and teaching more and more real math. To find out more about the Math is Figureoutable movement, visit mathisfigureoutable.com. And by the way, we will put the link to that debate, if you'd like to listen to it, in the show notes. Let's keep spreading the word that math is figureoutable.
Thanks for listening and making math more figure-outable.
Remember, we'll be opening registration for the Math is Figureoutable Challenge soon. Mark your calendar for September 3rd through 5th.
Hop on our email list to get all the details. Sign up at mathisfigureoutable.com/get-newsletter.